Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
In my association with Project Group, they definitely withheld information.
The whole fleet of them was on the NSA. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
Welcome to tonight's episode of the Total Disclosure Podcast. My name is Ty, and I am the host and creator of the show. We're thrilled to have with us John Sorflaten, a visionary author and former NSA contractor. John is renowned for his unique ability to intertwine science fiction with the profound philosophical insights about alien life. His work not only entertains, but invites us to ponder the deeper questions surrounding extraterrestrial existence and its potential impact on humanity. In today's conversation, we'll dive into John's intriguing perspective on the alien cover-up, the truth embargo, and drawing from his extensive experience in thought-provoking sci-fi narratives. Prepare for a captivating exploration of leadership and the possible influence of alien civilizations as we uncover the truths and fictions that shape our understanding of the universe. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the unknown together. Welcome, John.
Hey, Tyler. Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, actually, the pleasure is mine. I really am excited to have this conversation. But before we do, I did want to kind of talk about something that a mentor of mine is someone named Philip Mantle. And, you know, every single person in this field, no matter what your beliefs are, you should know the heart and soul that is Philip Mantle. He's been more than just a colleague. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend and a guy who could debate UFO sightings with the passion of someone who was trying to convince you that the crop circles are just really dedicated art projects by pranksters from another galaxy. Sadly, as some already know, Philip has been navigating some rough medical terrain. I just want to say that we send our thoughts and our prayers and our energy and our positive aura across the pond to our fellow UFO researcher and enthusiast, Philip Mantle. It's something that means a lot to me. And, you know, just show anyone who's listening, you know, reach out and show him some love and let him know you're thinking of him. So, John, thank you again so much for being here.
Well, you know, the Princeton pair research, that's where they had these random number generators around the world. They stopped being random at big events, including 9/11. So in a way, thoughts and prayers are not a bad idea. Get enough people, something happens.
And that's a fascinating study to me, because the implications for it are just because that would mean that our thoughts and our intentions matter. Not just matter, but they literally affect the matter around us. And if that is true, the implications are absolutely, I mean, just astounding.
That's true. And maybe let's go down a rabbit hole. I'm talking to you here from Fairfield, Iowa. It's not a famous town, a small town of about 10,000, but it does have a university here with a lot of people who do meditation, transcendental meditation specifically, and I'm one of those. And there's been a fair amount of research on the effects of having a large enough group meditating all at once on events like crime, um, war, automobile accidents, all that good stuff. And
Yeah.
that's quite amazing. But for example, one of the big, most recent researchers they analyzed data from 2006 to 2012. And during that time, at 2007, they started to have a large enough group to influence events in the United States. And you could see the trend lines going down for about 10 different variables, rapes, robberies, burglaries, different kinds of crime, automobile accidents. And then when that group started splitting up right around 2011 or so, the rates go back up. And so when the time comes, I can get you some pictures of that chart. And it's quite amazing. It's called
Wow.
the Maharishi effect. And friends of mine have been doing that research. And there's 45 studies like that.
Now, did you ever hear that? Because that's amazing. That is amazing. I would love, if you know some of the people, I would love to talk to someone in those studies. But there was another study. I can't remember what university or what um, institution it was that did it. I reference it a lot in the show, where they, before freezing water or drops of water, they would speak to them, and they would speak words to them, like love, anything with positive connotation, friendship, things like the empathy, words that symbolize quote unquote good. And the crystals, when frozen, they would be beautiful when they spoke words like love to them. They would form in these amazing, unison, beautiful, fractal, um, just ice. I don't know how to say it. Ice crystals. They were just beautiful.
Yeah.
But when they spoke words like, um, war, anger, anything that had a negative connotation, when the crystal froze or the water froze into ice, the crystals were very erratic and jumbly looking. So again, it just reinforces that notion that our words and our thoughts, our tensions, they may do more to the environment around us than we think.
No, that's a great example. I've heard about that research. I haven't read a lot, but it, you know, if these guys are telling us the truth, and there's no reason they shouldn't be, it is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, if people really want to look into this, look up the word panpsychism. Panpsychism means
Mm.
everything is consciousness, and all those great spiritual leaders would say that. And I myself have been looking into physics quite a bit to the degree I can understand it, but the idea of quantum entanglement pretty much captures the idea that everything is related to everything else.
Did
So
you?
you put your foot in one place, and somebody else is going to know about it 10 gazillion miles away.
Right, right. Did you see the image? I think so. They were able to take an image of an entangled. I want to say electron. Maybe I'm wrong, but they were able to take a picture of it, of an entangled something. I'll get the information. It sucks because I
Photon,
don't.
maybe?
Yeah, it was something,
Yeah.
but it looks like the yin yang symbol.
Well, really? Fantastic.
Yes. I wish I had like how Joe Rogan has a producer and he's like, just pull it up. I wish I don't have someone like that. Maybe in the future when the podcast is bigger. It's already
Sure.
pretty large, but when it's bigger, but I'll look it up in a minute. I want to give you my attention, obviously, but yeah,
Sure.
they showed the entangled, the entangled proton, electron, whatever it was, and it looked like the yin and yang symbol. So you start asking yourself, what influences what? Because it looks like from the micro all the way to the macro, there's intelligence everywhere.
Well, I'm into the yogic literature. I'm a 50-year meditator. I've been teaching transcendental meditation for 50 years. And, you read Patanjali and do the Yoga Sutras. that's a way of really getting into it if you want to
Right.
try out an experiment on yourself. So it's like being a living particle accelerator. You get enough energy going, and you can watch the atoms fall apart and go back together.
That's so that, that's pretty funny. You become your own particle accelerator. Uh, so John, just to give a little bit more context to who you are and how you got into this subject. Can you talk a little bit about your early life, your childhood, and your your how you beat the path down to the UFO world?
Well, someday I'm going to write my autobiography. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to take 60 seconds to share a great software idea. I wrote a blog about that, and for whatever reasons, the history overtook it. So you're all familiar with the Superman's Fortress of Solitude.
Absolutely.
So the question is, are you familiar with the Russell Crowe one or the Marlon Brando one? Take your pick.
I was gonna say, my audience, especially, I used to interview actors and I used to be in that world of specifically comic book movies. So I know all of them. Let's just assume the audience knows everything. But the Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's take on the Fortress was a little different.
Yeah, I agree. But the deal was, he had the crystal there. He put the crystal, he pushed it down, and then let's say Marlon Brando shows up, right? And he says, "Well, I'm your dad, dude, and I've sent you off in the spaceship from Krypton. It blew up, and here you are, dude. You're so lucky you're alive. I'm dead, but I'm talking to you." So that's quite a nice, interesting experience. Superman could actually talk to his dad, even though he was passed beyond. Now, gently say, would you like to be able to have your smartphone have an app on there where you could talk to your dad and mom and maybe your grandparents if you want? Well, we can do that nowadays. Did you know that?
Yeah, if we have enough of sampling of their voice, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have enough sampling of their voice and enough sampling of their ideas.
Yes.
Which is, now with our large language models, we can fill in the blanks, between the ideas you've given them. So when I wrote this blog, it was about two years ago. ChatGPT really hadn't hit the scenes yet, big.
Right.
And so I was saying, well, somebody should design this killer app and have this thing that automatically sends out emails and maybe even phone calls. Why not? You can do speech to text and then speech back to text, or text to speech, and then just to make the phone call to one of your relatives for whom you've given the phone number. Right. And then when they talk, it goes back to text, and that becomes part of the database for your large language model. So to make this long story short, we can do that now, and the people have already done that with books or any other text. We know that Notebook LM, you can do podcasts between two robotic characters. Not as charming as you at all, Tyler. You still have a job to do. Nobody's going to fire you. But anyway, here we are. I think I'm looking forward to that app. I want to record my kids. So I started out this story because you asked me about my childhood. I would like to be able to talk to my mom and my dad because, to be honest, I feel bad. I did not ask them questions when I was a kid. You know what I mean?
I am in the same.
And so for your audience, all I can do is say, ask your parents, how they met, how they fell in love, where did they go on their honeymoon, what kind of education did they get? And so I was talking to my former employer when I was writing this blog, because it was for his company after I retired. And I said, "Hey, Eric, did you ever ask your parents any questions?" I mean, I was at that time I was thinking of writing a book about questions to ask your parents, and I found out other people have already written it. And he says, "Well, yeah, John, I videotaped them answering the questions." So that really put the nail in the board. Um, I, I felt I was really behind on the learning curve on that. So when you ask me questions about my childhood, all I could say is I had a pretty great childhood. My parents, they put my brother and I on a lake with them. We lived on a lake up in Minnesota near Minneapolis, and for my junior and senior year in high school, we had a blast. Water skiing without skis. You know, you get a boat that's fast enough. Did you
Hell
know you could water
yeah.
ski?
Oh yeah. I grew up on a lake myself.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
I did.
What city or state was that?
It's a suburb of Boston called Billerica. I grew up on a place called
Oh,
Nuttings Lake.
far out. So here we
Yeah.
are. So the so where so I graduated from high school. Had a great time. I was in the band. I encourage anybody to encourage their kids to join the band. For me, it was you know, a break from being a nerd, and made a lot of good friends and enjoyed marching band. I wasn't into football, but I played drums, and that was fun. So then I went to the University of Minnesota, and I had to declare a major. And I had zero idea what I wanted to be. So here's my chain of thought at the time. I said, you know, I love my science fiction books that I read. So I think I want to be a science fiction author. But wait a minute, put your thinking cap on. What's the first thing you need to do? You need to have some facts, dude. You got to know something about science if you're going to write science fiction. You got to know science nonfiction first, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to be a physics major. Well, at the University of Minnesota, you can't study physics until you've taken a year of chemistry and a year of calculus, which I suffered through. And so my second year, I took my first physics class. You know, there's 200 people in the class with a big auditorium, sloping seats. And to be honest, I never really read the book. I never took the tests. And thank God I withdrew before the grades were finalized. And, you know, I was not a physics major. I realize now it's just too many details. Too many details.
For me, it's too much math. Math was never my strong
math.
suit. Yeah. So physics, it's. I'm happy to have someone explain it to me.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have some dip your toe. Got to dip your toe.
I know as much as I need to know.
So my school counselor says, "Well, John, you know, because I took some tests, he said, well, you're college material. You're not stupid. Well, it looks like you might be interested in the humanities and literature." And indeed, I really loved humanities. You know, the great ideas of the world, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, all these guys.
Schrodinger.
They were thinkers, and boy, that set the pattern for me, and made me realize that my dharma, that's a technical term, by the way, dharma, was to be a thinker. So English lit and humanities. Now, reflecting back from many years after that, I realized a flaw in our educational system, and I'm saying this to viewers who might be advising their kids. When I took English lit, I had to read all these friggin' novels. And, you know, it takes time to read, you know, 350-page novel. And I would advocate now, if I was an English lit teacher, I'd advocate the Cliff Notes approach to novels, because then you get the idea of the trends, because that's really what you're getting into, the trends of time and the different styles that come and go. And you want to be able to talk about the styles. And okay, you read one chapter of Hemingway's Man on the Sea. That's all you need is just one chapter. You don't read the whole book. And then, so the second part of this is, well, what's the value of learning trends? Well, in our contemporary society, you know, the goal is not to get a BA in English lit so that you can go become a teacher of English lit.
Right.
Well, the goal of taking English lit is so you can get a job as a critic for book reviews or movie reviews, or you can go to Hollywood and being a script reader and say no day after day after day. By the way, in film school, one of my buddies he was a script reader. He said that was his job, say no, and in nice ways.
Oh my God, yeah. 'Cause so many people don't realize how many scripts are submitted
Exactly.
that never ever see the light of day.
So,
And it's kind of a good
and
thing.
he went on to be a great, successful producer, by the way. He developed good criteria for what makes a movie great, and he produced TV movies and films. So anyway, English lit is not a lost cause. That's part of my story. But back then, and this was in the 60s, the faculty really didn't position it for anything. In fact, I asked one of my professors, well, what's the job outcome of being an English lit? And he says, I don't really know. And
Right.
the party line on this is really, it's a liberal arts, and liberal it has a specific meaning. By the way, the liberal came about when people were chafing at the bit of having kings.
Mm.
You might remember back in the 19th century, there was a big fight between the regular people and the kings, and the regular people
Yes.
became known as liberals because they were liberal. They didn't want
Exactly.
kings.
Yes. Yes.
So that's where the word liberal came from when you get down to it. So the liberal arts is, you can be a knowledgeable person. And it's not left to the aristocracy to know this stuff. You as a common person can know this stuff, the
Right.
history of the world, great ideas. So the liberal arts does serve a purpose for people. But if you are looking for a job, English lit should really prepare you to be a movie producer. Why not? George
Right,
Lucas did it.
yeah, but English, like you said,
Yes.
English lit and that kind of a degree, it can be applied to many things, whereas certain other degrees can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Where, say you're a teacher, you can't just be like, you know what, I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I'm going to go to the medical field. You can't just walk in there. You know, you need to take
Yeah.
the certified, you need to be trained to be a medical assistant or a doctor or a phlebotomist or whatever it is. The skills are not interchangeable.
Right. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I was a liberal arts guy, and so I'm giving you my career in a nutshell. I went for 4 years at the University of Minnesota, and I didn't graduate because I was short a language class. And so then my parents had moved to California, Santa Cruz, from Minneapolis, and I followed them out there in the fall of '64. And then I went to a junior college, so in a way I was regressing, but it was really fun. I took all the courses I couldn't take. I couldn't take before. I took a theater course, I took an art course, a drawing course, and I had a blast. I did take a language course, thinking I would finish my degree. It was in German. I needed that class, but guess what? I flunked that class because I never did anything, and I was too dumb to withdraw at the right time. So I shot myself in the foot there. Didn't graduate, but guess what? Nature works it out. At that time, Vietnam was getting hot and heavy, right? And I got a mystery call from a Air Force recruiter there in Santa Cruz while I was taking the junior college stuff. And he says, well, John, your number's up for the draft. Do you really want to get drafted? He was a good salesman guy. And I said, no, not really. And he says, well, what would you like to do? I'm with the Air Force. We're able to steer people in the right direction. So I thought a minute because I was wondering myself, what do I want to do? And I said, well, I took a class of film. Pardon?
I was going to say, when the Air Force is calling, when they say that it's your numbers being called upon for the draft, do you have a say? Because
well,
what was
back
that
then
like?
they had a draft number. Well, they had a draft number, and to be honest, I didn't follow it very carefully. But certain numbers meant you wouldn't get drafted, and other numbers meant somebody's going to call you up soon.
Okay.
So I got called up ahead of time by the recruiter who thought he needed some Air Force people. I'd been in Air Force officer, reserve officer training, ROTC. I think that's how they got my number and tracked me
Oh,
down.
gotcha.
I did pretty well on their tests in there, and I scored a 95th percentile for all the categories. And so maybe they were
NASVAB?
headhunting, you know. I scored 95 percentile in all their categories, you know, navigator, pilot, whatever.
Wow.
So
So you could, I mean, you could have had your pick of the litter.
I guess that's the deal. And maybe I should have stayed in ROTC, you know. And by the way, if anybody's listening to this and they have a chance to get into ROTC, do it, man. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I advocate military for if it all fits your parameters, because you get lots of responsibility as early in your life as is ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the guy says, "Hey, John, I just read about this film program. The Air Force will help you finish college and then make you an officer, and you will be a film producer director for 4 years." Wow. Would you jump at that? I jumped at it. And so I joined the Air Force. I went to basic training in San Antonio. During that basic training, they said, "Well, we have an announcement, everybody. Listen up. If you thought you were going to go to this college program right after basic training, think again. We're changing the rules," they said. "You got to wait a year." So okay, I meant I had to wait a year.
You got
But I went to electronics. Pardon? I got hoodwinked, but I got to say it all worked out. I went to electronics school. I loved it. I learned how to wire up my stereo. I became a ground radio repairman, and then I was stationed up near Sacramento, California. That was great because Sacramento, you know, is only 70 miles from San Francisco. And this was the 60s, dude.
Yeah, this
The
was the 60s,
I had a
man.
girlfriend in San Francisco. So that was great for me. And
That's awesome.
So at that during that time, then I applied for this program, and amazingly, even though there were no guarantees, and they kept saying there's no guarantees, I got in. So I started film school back in end of fall of '66, and I volunteered for a film project right away because, you know, you got to jump in, man. And there's this young, rather short film student who was running the show. I was just what they call a gopher, you know, go for this and go for that. Then he was directing, believe it or not, he was directing Raymond Burr. That's the actor who played Ironsides. And he was walking from point A to point B in this rather lush scenery. It was like an arboretum. And I was told that, oh yeah, they're just doing some pickup shots. They're going to use these to pull together some other film that's already in the can. So the guy who was directing Raymond Burr turned out to be George Lucas. And, you know, I didn't know who he was at first, but as I continued in film school, it turns out he was a rather famous student. He was now in a master's degree program when I was there. He had previously completed his bachelor's degree in cinema and doing very well. So I turned out to be a teaching assistant for a directing class. I volunteered because I just wanted to get in and see some action. George Lucas took the class while I was taking it too, and I get to tell you, Tyler, George showed up twice for that semester class, and during that class, though, he made a film which is on YouTube. I found out, and I'll see if I can think of the title. It might come in a moment, but I can't think of it right now. But all of George's film school things are on YouTube, and just do a search, George Lucas Film School, USC. So that's the beginning of my film career. I graduated, went to officer training, and did 4 years of being a producer, writer, and director.
And you were doing this for the Air Force?
for the Air Force. As
So
a
what
long
kind of
tradition
films were you
of
making? Like
filmmaking in
propaganda?
the military, by the way. You could call it that. You could call it that. For example, I was in Vietnam from 69 to 70. We did what are called hometown news releases. Okay, so you're a podcast host right now, right? So imagine
Yes.
you were in the Air Force doing podcasts. What I do is do some stock footage of some listeners listening to podcasts, and then I'd photograph you for 30 seconds actually doing the podcast.
Mhm.
Now let's say there's 10 other guys who are also doing podcasts. We would use the same stock footage for everybody and then just do the individual 30 seconds for each individual. Then they would send these clips off to everybody's hometown, and they would watch on TV about their kid. Hey, George, my kid's on TV. You can see what he's doing out in Vietnam now.
Oh, that's actually pretty smart.
It is
It's
hometown news releases.
now, but most people were not favorable towards the war. Is that correct?
Well, the definition of most, let's say a lot of people were not in favor. We had Kent State. Gee whiz, that was pretty tough for college students. Marching against the Vietnam War and the National Guard shooting and killing some people. That's bad. Yes, there was a lot of turmoil. We can't deny that. But on the other hand, there was a lot of people who felt that was okay. I myself was sort of in between. I'm going to give you my personal deep philosophy. If you have 60 seconds, you have 60 seconds?
You have 60 seconds. You have as many 60 seconds as you need.
I think there's such a thing as karma. And karma is sort of divided up. You got karma for this, you got karma for that. So you got family karma. You got karma for your body, the way you were born. You got some karma that belongs to the country you're in. You got karma belonging to what planet you're on. You got karma that belongs to, what you did last week. That's your personal karma. So I figured, my particular take on the whole thing was I had some karma just living in the country. And at that time in my life, I was not very politically active. So I felt that if going off to Vietnam was fulfilling my duty, that was my karma, just to be there in the country and doing that. So I understood and I heard a lot of the anti-war things. I actually did a march in Los Angeles when I was in film school, anti-war, and there I was in the Air Force. But I did it anyway. So whether that's a rational explanation or not, you tell me.
Right. It remains to be seen. While you were in the Air Force, did you ever hear of any sightings or anything that kick-started you into this notion that there could be something the US government is hiding?
That's a good question. And to be honest, the answer is no.
Okay.
I just wasn't in those circles. On the other hand, I will say I was an avid reader of Edgar Cayce.
Ooh.
Now, I don't know if you've heard of Edgar Cayce, of course.
Of course I have. Edgar Cayce.
I probably read 10 or 15 books of him, and I was a member of the Edgar Cayce Society, and getting all these readings, and that really opened my eyes that there's such a thing as psychic capabilities. It's hard to deny that the human mind has further reaches of which we know not, given his ability to, let's say, prescribe a medication for somebody and then tell his handlers, yes, you will find this part of the medication on the top shelf of this drugstore. And if you go to that other drugstore, the third shelf over, you're going to find the other medication, and then you mix them together in this way.
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
pretty
No.
mind-blowing.
And it's funny that you bring that specific up, because the episode that is out right now on my on the feeds is I spoke to the estate of Ingo Swann, and we dove into his life and essentially he's the father of remote viewing, widely
Right.
considered. So yeah, it's been something I've been talking about a lot lately. Hal Puthoff, Ingo Swann, Pat Price, Edgar Casey. I mean, and ties to L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. I mean, it gets really, really weird, really, really fast.
I'm a remote viewing fan. I read 4 or 5 books about that. That was pretty mind blowing, and I was particularly interested in their technique. Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff, they were reading the Vedic literature, and
Yes.
they got the technique from Patanjali.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Yep.
Yoga
It's
Sutras.
I love how I'm glad that someone else can recognize it, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how long remote viewing and this psychic phenomena has actually been going on, because I think for some reason, at least in my opinion, I do think that everybody has the ability to remote view and do these things with intent and practice. It's about, it may take you all your life, but I think it's an innate thing that is built into us. And I mean, some people are just, they're able to access it a little bit easier. And it is what it is. But this all goes back to what we were talking about, is our thoughts and our intentions affect the world around us. I mean, if talk about entanglement, what is remote viewing if not two consciousnesses or one consciousness entangling with the oneness, right?
Exactly.
So I
And
think quantum physics are going to be something that it's going to lead science, I think, hopefully, into this topic, and it's going to bring them there naturally, because they're going to start having questions that the answers don't fundamentally, they don't understand it.
no, it's a beautiful statement. And I did my dissertation for my PhD on what's called the development of logic from the perspective of the Swiss child psychologist Jean Piaget. And he was studying logic. And of course, he took we know there's a difference between adult logic versus a child's logic. For example, a child under the age of 7 will look at a dime and a quarter, and a dime and a nickel. I'm sorry, and you ask them, well, which one is more valuable? They'll say that the nickel. I hope I'm using my terms correctly. The nickel versus the dime. The nickel is bigger than the dime
Right.
in our
So
current
therefore, it
currency.
must.
Right. And so the larger coin is looked at as more valuable to the young child. Well, that's because the frame of reference hasn't expanded yet to account for the value of the metal in it, or the assigned value as well. We all know it costs more to make a penny than what's in the penny. So now we're talking about assigned value as opposed to real value in any
Right.
event. So the development of logic, it turns out that if you look at adults and even college students in my own research as well, only 50% actually possess the mental structures, as they're called. It's almost a physiological thing, the mental structures to conduct what's called adult logical reasoning, or the actual term is formal operational reasoning. So now here we are, and by the way, so formal operational reasoning means you can deal with addition and subtraction, multiplication, and division, and then also the idea of inference. If this, then that. Now, quantum mechanics actually goes beyond that. it goes beyond those simple things. Because, if, for example, in quantum mechanics, if you multiply A times B, and then later you multiply B times A, you get two different answers. Now, that's a mind blower right there, but that's the definition of quantum mechanics, because I'd want to go into detail, but position and momentum can't be known simultaneously. And it's the sequence of multiplication that determines that issue. So that's why I'm interested in quantum mechanics, because it's a whole step forward in humanity's possession of logic. The definition of logic is now different.
After Vietnam, I'm really interested to find out where you get into the subject of UFOs and extraterrestrial life, at what point that happens. So, but I want to do this sequentially. So after Vietnam, after you leave the Air Force, what's your next steps?
It's a big change. You know, we all have different inflection points in our lives. So I got out in 72. I was 30 years old. Does that remind you of anything? You know, a lot of people, a lot of stuff happens when you're 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I don't want to draw comparisons, but, you know, Jesus started his ministry when he was 30 years old. Well, for me, I sort of became alive then. So I had a girlfriend, and she had an idea. Well, let's go to this meditation course out on the West Coast. And I was in Florida. I had just been a unit leader for a small photographic group for U.S. Strike Command, which is now CENTCOM. That's the group that's running the Middle East operations. So we had a photographic group for that. And so we got my little VW bus, made out to be a camper, went through Mexico, went up to coast of California to Humboldt, California, went to a 1-month really cool meditation course, which led to invitation to become a TM teacher in Spain, La Antilla, Spain. So my girlfriend and I went there. Then we came back and got married, and then had kids. So this is one of those stories. Life happens. You know what I mean?
Right, right. So life does happen, and it happens kind of not ordinary, but you say you have a somewhat quote unquote as normal as can be.
As normal as can be. So the question is, you know, well, where do UFOs come in on this? Well, there's a sort of a subtext to everything. You know, what is one's belief structure? Well, I mentioned I was into Edgar Cayce. Well, right there, that is a major component of belief structure. Man, Edgar Cayce, you know, was a psychic. Under hypnosis, he could basically know anything that needed to be known. Past lives, well, the future is somewhat indeterminate. Now I'm asking myself, what did he say about UFOs? To be honest, I can't remember. And I will bow to you if you have any recollection about what he said on UFOs.
Edgar?
Did he say anything about UFOs?
I would say that I always thought he was more or talked more about the supernatural and paranormal, that plane. But
well, yeah. Yeah,
let me ask AI. So yeah, so the AI's what I'm getting here is Edgar Cayce, a self-proclaimed prophet from Kentucky in the early 1900s, claimed to have encountered otherworldly beings. Some have used Cayce's claims to support the idea that UFOs and extraterrestrial life exist. But so it doesn't sound like he's talking about you know, a craft, but he definitely was involved with beings with non-human intelligence. And
well, that's a very good point. Very good point. So maybe the technology, you know, flying saucers per se, were not in the conversation, but at the same time, forces, as so to speak, forces were exerted from the beyond onto the Earth plane, and so. And back in, you know, well, he passed away in 45. Did most of his readings in, you know, the 30s and the 20s and 30s and 40s. Maybe UFOs hadn't come to the attention. As you probably know better than I, it appears that radioactivity is something that seems to get the attention of UFOs. So the radioactivity, was not that hot until, when they started with the Manhattan Project. And there we go. That was 42 or so.
Right.
So
But you could make a case, no pun intended, that you could make the Edgar case, but you could make a case that maybe he just left that aspect out of it, and maybe he did see craft, but the phrasing wasn't there, so he used it in different terms. So this would have to be answered by someone who really knows his story in depth, to see if there's any parables or any kind of words that may have been him trying to say it flew in the air, it somehow flew around, it did this and that, it was their craft, but we that word doesn't exist yet, aircraft.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable from my recollection, because I just don't remember. I think I would have remembered if he said anything about UFOs. So here I am. But meanwhile, I'm learning about the Vedas. I'm learning about meditation. I'm learning about higher states of consciousness. 7 states of consciousness: sleep state, dream state, wake state, and then when you're meditating, you go beyond thought, and the word for that is called transcend thought. That's the transcendental state. Okay, you can have thoughts during your meditation, and don't worry about having thoughts, but there will be times when you do go beyond thought, and the breath might go very, very faint. So that's an indicator that you're going in the direction of beyond thoughts. And it might even happen that breath stops, but you're certainly not trying to stop your breath. It just happens automatically. And that's can be even known as what's called anaerobic metabolism. Your body is existing without metabolizing oxygen per se from the air. It's metabolizing oxygen that's already in the cells in the form of fats and other organic compounds. So the notion of not breathing, by the way, is fairly well established. There are documented stories of English military colonels that would actually be requested to observe a yogi burying himself under 3 feet of dirt. He can't breathe down there, and they stay there for a week, and then they dig him up, and he's running around just like anybody. So the idea that we need normal oxygen requirements is sort of old stuff. We don't under certain conditions.
Could that be maybe one factor? And I'm kind of veering off here, but I like to so I don't mean to interrupt. But do you think that could be almost what happens with certain near-death experiences where someone's thought to be dead, but they continue to have some sort of conscious awareness because the brain does still have oxygen. It's just consuming it in a different way than from breathing.
That's a very reasonable. That's very reasonable. And I think any number of medical personnel will tell you that the documentation is very strong. People are flatlined; they don't have any EEG, but when they come back with the stories of hearing things and knowing exactly what went wrong when they were laying on the operating table and the doctor was, talking about what rock and roll music he really liked, while the patient was flatlined, and the patient will tell the story. So yes, definitely there's stuff going on.
That's interesting. Okay, so continue, my friend. This is fascinating.
And so the yogis have learned how to control the body, which is a fabulous thing. When we're dreaming, think of all the things that we are inventing while we're dreaming. Well, if you could dream while you're conscious, if you could dream while you're conscious, doesn't that open up a vista? And in a way, that's what a novelist is doing. And that was one of my motivations for writing these novels, because I wanted to experience what it was to create a reality, even while I'm here on Earth, as an experience. And then, of course, even to make it into film, which is my ultimate goal. If we have any producers listening to this show, please call me up.
I'm right here.
A really good deal.
I'm right here.
And so this idea of expanding our consciousness. So I was talking about the first 4 states of consciousness, the 4th one being the transcendental consciousness without thoughts. So now the 5th state of consciousness is when you can have this calmness in relationship with thoughts, of being calm and just sort of watching things, float down the river. Yes, everything is happening, but I am immobile, I am calm, I am silent. If you experience that while you're in waking state, that's the 5th state of consciousness, and that's called cosmic consciousness. And a lot of people have been writing about that. Even back in 1905, people were really surprised about Walt Whitman and his poetry. And little known fact, which I just recently ran across, Walt Whitman was reading the Sufi poets at that time. And of course, the Sufi poets were talking about higher states of consciousness. That's why their poetry is so engaging. Rumi and the other guys. So Maurice Book was a Canadian doctor, medical doctor. He knew Walt Whitman and other people who had experiences similar to Walt Whitman's experiences. I am everything. I am mankind. All of those represent, a way of perceiving reality. And so Maurice Book wrote the book called Cosmic Consciousness. And I'm not saying that his definition is the same as cosmic consciousness in the outline I'm giving you of the 7 states of consciousness, but they're very close. So, when you can go through life pretty much with equanimity. In other words, I love this phrase. Somebody told me once, "Oh yeah, I don't have problems anymore. I just have situations." What would I mean to you, Tyler? I don't have problems anymore. I just have situations.
Right, because it's all about perspective.
It's a perspective, exactly. And so the nervous system has been, conditioned, cultured. It's been, if you do enough exercise, more exercise doesn't bother you at all.
Right, becomes
so if you've done enough transcending, pardon?
Muscle memory, right?
Muscle memory. That's a beautiful term. Yeah, muscle memory. So then the question is, well, where do you go from cosmic consciousness? Where you just feel at ease. Well, do you ever feel like, did you ever find a topic you were really interested in? You just really wanted to drill down on it. Well, you do that every time you're doing a podcast. You're doing great. You ask questions. You're fascinated. Well, that fascination represents what? It's an interest in the mechanics. It's an interest in where the creativity is coming out of creation. I'm getting a little woo-woo here, but you get the idea?
Well, yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
Do you believe in the muse?
In the what?
The muse?
Yes, the muse is a beautiful concept associated with this.
Do you believe that when, especially for someone like, okay, that you're kind of a very good example for someone who is writing and then someone who's also playing an instrument. It's some artists and some artists will say that, and genius will say that it's almost like they're channeling from the oneness and they are but the instrument to facilitate getting it to the world. So So many people have talked about this, from all the way from Einstein, to modern day, quote unquote mediums. So what is really, what is that? Is that the oneness, the muse?
Yes, it's a beautiful way of talking about it. I haven't heard it, but I totally agree. The concept of the muse has sort of gone away for the last 100 years. Why
Even
has that
though it's
happened?
in a
Well,
lot of our words, right? The root word
yeah,
muse is in music. Even look at amusement, right?
yeah,
So
without the
yesterday,
muse.
yeah, exactly. So muse, I find it to be fascinating.
Well,
Fascinating.
people have written recently about the return of the muse. So the idea of the muse 100 years ago in the 19th century was, I am being visited by a higher creative force than myself. Well, so what's been happening since then, the last 100 years? It's I have been creative as opposed to being gifted. I am getting a gift as opposed to I am doing it. So
Right.
we've gone to the ego as the doer instead of, you know, the some external assistance.
You're absolutely right. And you know what is ironic? You bring this up at a crucial time, because I was invited down to the UFO hearings on November 13th. And I went there, and I was lucky enough to I know several members of Congress. And I was invited personally, and I had a seat saved for me. But I scheduled a meeting with Nancy Mace, who chaired the hearing. And I was going to originally just film myself asking her questions to use in a large kind of like mini documentary. But plans changed when I found out that Steve Bassett and Bob Salas were going to be there. Bob and Steve confronted me and asked, would you be willing to take a knee and use your time with Nancy Mace, take yourself out of it, and let Bob brief her on what happened at the nuclear base on 67? And you can still film it. You're still facilitating it, but would you set your ego aside? He didn't say this, but he was essentially asking me, will you put your ego aside and let a guy who's been trying to tell his story for 50 years to someone in Congress, let him do it? And
Wow.
I had a choice to make. And I ultimately chose to work with Bob and Steve. And the things, the it seems my path has been almost forged, and I'm just kind of walking it. And as soon as I let my ego go, all of a sudden, all the right things started happening.
That's a beautiful story. It
It's
really captures, and it's the idea of a fascination with the creative process
Yeah.
of nature, letting
Yes.
nature unfold and appreciating it.
Yes.
So it's becoming conscious of nature's unfolding. So notice that we still have two entities involved here. We have nature and we have yourself, which could be said, because it's a transcendental self, it's a silent self, which is a wonderful thing. And it's the ability to appreciate. So that's the sixth state of consciousness. But wait a minute, we're talking about seven states of consciousness. Oh my goodness, what more could there be? So at this point, we're going to go talk to the poets. So William Butler Yeats, he was into theosophy, by the way, and Annie Besant and all those guys back in the 10s and 1920s and so forth. He was up in Ireland, as you know. So when he wrote a poem about schoolyards, and at the end of the poem, and most people have heard this phrase in one context or another, he says, and when the dancer becomes the dance. Ooh, it sends chills up my spine when you.
Yeah. Yep.
What, so I'll just let you appreciate when the dancer becomes the dance, or when the dancer and the dance are one. It's a poem. Everybody gets to invent their own meaning. What does that mean to you? When
That
the dancer and the dance become one.
that would that has some I could go on for days about what that could possibly mean and what it does mean to me. That is when I think the sync when you are one with what you are doing, then that you'll feel it. And that's when you access things like the muse, at least in my own experience. But I've done deep meditation, and I've done other things where I've taken DMT, um, and I've experienced beings of in
Yeah.
my own consciousness. Wh- it's in that's the stuff. I'm wondering if these other people that we've been speaking about, Edgar Casey, all these people, were they in tune with something that we're seeing also today? So
I
I
think
want to
so.
start talking about non-human intelligence. So
Sure.
yeah, where what do you think the agenda is? Because in my idea, or in my perspective, it seems to be that there's not just one phenomenon, it's multiple phenomena. And there are beings that are probably more interdimensional, like the ones I see or people see in DMT trips, or deep meditation. But then there are these nuts and bolts and more right in front of you kind of phenomena,
Sure.
physical.
So, in my email, I mentioned I was going to check out Carl Jung's book on flying saucers. He wrote that 1957, published then. It was his last book. And so you sort of think about, well, what was going on, in 1950s that would motivate this world-renowned psychologist who sort of actually his life's mission was to talk about enlightenment. That's really what it was, and it was in rebellion to Freud's discussion where Freud boiled everything down to sex. Carl Jung's goal is to basically boil down the process of life is moving towards enlightenment. And the word he used was individuation, becoming the individual that you are, as opposed to becoming one of the collective, like a robot moving through life, just going through the motions. No, who are you as a unique individual? So in your case, you're a podcaster, and you have this identity, and you're creative, you're doing things. And anybody else listening to the show, that you have a creative component that you're making an impression on the world around you and changing things, as opposed to being a part of the collective. And that's basically where the concept of collective unconscious came from. When you tear away all the individuality of what's left, well, you're just living what is the unconscious impulse that has motivated humanity through the years, as in these different so-called archetypes. So then
Right.
you're just living the archetype as opposed to living your individuality. So
Right.
to make a long story short, where do UFOs fit in his concept, which I've sort of enjoyed? Yes, he believed that there were real things. He said there are radar echoes from these unidentified flying objects. And he says people are not imagining the radar echoes. So it's
Right.
not totally just a psychological thing.
Right.
We have to admit
There
it's
is
something real.
physicality.
But then he said, what is the psychological component? He said, if UFOs have been around a long time, and then he cited different paintings that were done in the 1500s that showed objects in the sky. And because of the metaphors at the time, they sort of looked like cannonballs or whirling wheels, as in the wheels of Ezekiel from the Bible.
And then there's the baptism of Jesus, and there's what looks like a UFO shining a light down on him.
That painting, yes, very
Yeah,
interesting. Very
very,
interesting. So,
yeah.
so this is beautiful because what we're saying is the phenomena, whatever it is, gets interpreted in the vocabulary of the day, the metaphors of the day. So then, what Jung is saying is, here we are today. We have mechanical things, and therefore these phenomena, whatever they are, we know they're real. We're, of course, interpreting them. And he said the notion of flying saucers, which are circular, and then we have the cigar-shaped spaceships.
Mhm.
These are two basic shapes, archetypal shapes. And circles basically are symbol of wholeness. So we just went through the 7 states of consciousness. A circular form does represent unity, the highest states of consciousness, where the dancer and the dance are one. And Jung makes the point that this unified awareness uh, is the goal of life, individuation. And the flying saucers, well, we're using the term flying saucers to put a concept of
Mm.
wholeness onto something in the environment, and it happens to be something going on in the sky because we can't touch it. That happens to be the fact of enlightenment. It is very hard to touch or taste or feel. So we end up projecting these inner feelings of, what it would be like to have a more fulfilling life. And in one sense, the notion of good aliens are it, because you can fill in all the blanks with the concept of good aliens. Now,
Right.
are there bad aliens? Well, we'll open the door to that a little bit. Well, is there such a thing as the devil or hell? And in some religious contexts, people will state there is a bad state of affairs. And if we look at UFOs, some people will project this reality onto the bad aliens. That tends to be the cigar-shaped spaceships in different lore. So to make a long story short, in Jung's concept, there we go. Wow, the Chinese version. I love it.
Mm. I mean,
Where does
doesn't
that
that
come?
so I'm just gonna go through a few here that stand out to me. I mean, here we got the one in the corner. So if you look up at the
Oh
corners,
yeah, I see.
they're
The
calf.
right side corner and the left side.
This is the baptism of Christ, with clearly again, we look at this and then we look at this. I mean, what are we looking at here? Like they they are trying to tell us something without overtly telling us exactly what, because it could be, especially in like the Renaissance era, like if you were working, you didn't want the church to be coming for you. That was the last thing you needed. So
Right.
it's almost like they're blending it into the background for a reason, to warn the future, right? Hey, we're seeing these
Yeah.
things. We're seeing them.
Very good point. Very good
So
point.
my
And
question
it's
to
an
you,
inspiration. It's an inspiration, to people looking at the painting, to help them gain a context. If they were to have an inner experience, they can use this painting as a guide to interpreting that inner experience.
right, right. I mean, and I tell people this so much, is that you look, especially in the United States, here we have the native cultures. They didn't just carve into rock or leave messages on rock because they didn't matter. It was all that mattered. This knowledge
Beautiful.
needed to be passed, right? This was
Beautiful.
not something
Yeah.
that could not be shared. And it would be foolish, so foolish of us as scientists and archaeologists and just civilization, if we didn't look at these things and say, what are they trying to tell us?
Yeah. So that leads me to my novels, because My novels are a form in which people can use to interpret their personal experience. And the idea of UFOs, we have good aliens who are supporting the hero and his sister in their perception. And their perception is that we have this strange phenomena. We have two novels. One is the origin story when their birth and their early childhood, and when their parents appreciate the same set of concepts, and then when they're older, they've been separated their entire life, and now they meet again when they're 61 years old. In both occasions, they become aware of the issue of global warming.
Oh.
And so after thinking about it, I'm going to pose this as a little riddle for you. So we have human leaders, and we expect that human leaders, of course, are looking out for humanity. We're humans. We expect our leaders to look out for us. And then the question being, if some human leaders are talking about global warming and they're saying it's not really happening, dudes, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be cool. But wait a minute. The National Defense Statement for 2020 makes a big point that the single most important threat that the U.S. faces is global warming. The Defense Initiative.
Yeah.
Well, why is it such a big thing? Well, as your coastal cities, not only in the U.S., but also in India, Indonesia, Europe, as they become flooded, where are all those people going to go? They're all going to go to the highlands, and they all want to go to the same highlands, so they're going to end up fighting about it, and we have mass chaos. Now, so we're saying that so go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. We had a little delay there. So I apologize for interrupting you. But yeah, this is where we revert back to primitive behavior, fighting over land.
Fighting over land. Yes, there you go. So this is the big threat, from the military perspective, as the largest threat facing the United States in the near-term future is global warming, because of the chaos that will ensue as people are leaving the low-lying areas. So wait a minute, we have their human leaders looking out for humanity, but wait a minute. Some of these leaders are denying. They're saying, dudes, you got the wool pulled over your eyes. It's not really happening. Now, I don't know about you, but I studied logic in college, and everybody knows a little bit of logic. And if somebody is denying something that you really know is happening, maybe your interests aren't really in the top of their mind. So I'm humbly suggesting, from a fictional point of view, which it comes out in both books, that those human leaders who are denying global warming aren't really human. They're actually aliens. And they want humans to suffer, because then humanity will be in a weakened position fighting over the land. And the bad guys, the bad aliens, can come in, swoop in, and take over. So that's the story, dude.
Doctor, do you think, I'm going to ask you this just straight up. I know it's a fiction, but how much of it do you think, take the main character out, obviously, right? Obviously, we know those people that doesn't exist, but the themes that you're touching on, are you trying to tell someone something?
We are in the age of conspiracies. We are in the age of conspiracy, and I appreciate it. I have my own couple of conspiracy theories, and I try to keep them to myself. But the fact is, we all watch TV all the time. I'm guilty of that. I love NCIS. My wife and I were on third time through the whole series of NCIS. And well, what are we watching? We're watching the uncovering of the conspiracy of the criminal or bad guy who killed somebody. That's a conspiracy. And we're watching Gibbs and his crew uncover the conspiracy. So of course, we're all built. We are, as humans, are built to see things as a conspiracy. We love it. And then we get to uncover it. And then we're sort of feeding our own ego and feeling good. Oh, I uncovered the conspiracy. I know more than you do. Sorry, Ty, you're in the backwaters. I know more conspiracies and I've solved everything myself. You haven't. And so there
Okay.
we go. We're competing about the ability to uncover conspiracies and then teach each other the
Okay.
reality behind things. That's human nature. So I'm proposing, yeah, there is a big conspiracy, darn it. That conspiracy is, I think there's really aliens out there leading humans astray. Not all the leaders, just the ones that are denying global warming. There is no other explanation.
So do you think now, do you think that there are, because we look at some statements made by Haim Ishad. I believe he was like the Israeli equivalent to like the head of NASA, but highly decorated military man as well. And he said that there's some sort of federation, galactic federation. This sounds so bizarre, so wildly bizarre, coming from someone like this. And not only does he say that exists, there's good and bad extraterrestrials, some that have our best interest at heart and some that don't. And then there's others that are indifferent, and indifferent, is could be the most dangerous. And the United States knows about it, as well as Donald Trump, who is our president to be sworn in 4 days from recording this.
There we go. Yeah. Well, I showed you this book, and I'll bring it up again. I'm impressed by this book. It's published.
I just watched
20.
him testify.
Really incredible.
Yeah, I was at the hearing that he testified at. Now, listen. So you're a former NSA contractor. What is that?
Yep.
What is that? A lot of people have a lot of speculation on certain 3-letter agencies. Now, I don't think that I think that what is allowed for a conspiratorial culture is because our government has been caught with their pants down so often that it allows for a conspiratorial environment to thrive. Because when you can't trust an organization or a group of organizations, you start looking for certain things, right? And I can't help but ask, what did you do with NSA, and do you really trust these 3-letter agencies?
That's a good question, and I'll just share my personal experience. So I was a contractor. I met a lot of people. So let's say these are mid-level management people. They're not James Clapper and the other guys, but mid-level people.
Okay.
They were all, I felt, to be honest, hardworking, and patriotic. I stress the word patriotic, meaning, yeah, they love their country. They don't want to screw people over. It's just not in the blood of, you don't jump through the hoops that are needed to get that kind of job. If I may use the phrase, screw people over. Now let's talk about conspiracy theories. Just from a mathematical point of view, let's say you got one guy, he has a conspiracy. He has a magic device here. He could press the button and then the world blows up. Just one guy. You could say, well, wow, that's a pretty powerful situation. What are the chances of somebody finding out about that? Well, they're pretty slim because it's only one guy. They could keep it pretty secret. But let's just say it's 0.5% that the secret might be let loose, right? Well, guess what? If you start adding people to the group, that 0.5% of the secret getting out now suddenly grows to 2%. When you got 10 people, and then if you got 20 people, it's suddenly grown to 15% chance of the secret getting out. By the time you have 100 people, the odds of that secret getting out are growing and growing and growing. So this, to me, there's the mathematical truth behind this. The more people you have involved in a conspiracy, the harder it is to keep it going. Okay. So that is the main reason why the feeling that these large institutions, the CIA and the NSA, keeping really dramatic secrets that require a whole lot of people, even with the security requirements. I had a top secret clearance with the SCI, special compartmented information. That was about as high as you can get, unless you were the president or whoever.
Right.
I had to take a lie detector test, and so basically, when you have a large enough group of people, something is going to leak, and in a way, that's what we're seeing now. This book represents the government finally passing a law that says Congress should know about what's going on with these contractors who have buried secrets for tens and 20 years based on recovering UFO devices. And they're exploiting those secrets in principle to build new things that haven't been known before. They said that Congress should know about this too. I thought that was pretty cool. But the idea of large scale conspiracy, I think people should have some confidence that the whistleblower effect is going to kick in at some point. We know that there are whistleblowers, and at tremendous risk to themselves, their career, they blow the whistle. And that's the example of what I'm saying. It's if somebody has a magic wand, but they're keeping the big secret, there's going to be with a large enough group, there's going to be a whistleblower. Now, I'll ask you, Ty, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, and look at the NSA. The NSA is a perfect example of this because of okay, you look at the NSA, and most people didn't even know it existed before Edward Snowden, and then
Yes, very good.
You could argue we can argue all the live long day about what he did and whether it was truly treason or was it justified. I think he did cross a line, but ultimately we're better with the information having been out there. I think he could have been gone about it a little bit differently because I mean, people died because their covers were exposed. So that to me, that whistleblowing to what degree? So what we have in the UFO community is not even really technically whistleblowing. I mean, you just held up the book Imminent by Lou Elizondo. Now, Elizondo, even when sworn under oath, speaking to Congress, will say, I can't speak about that due to
good point.
This, right? So this is a Dobser approved whistleblower, right? This is a DOD pre-publication approved disclosure. So I think there is a controlled disclosure, a controlled drip happening, and they are priming the human population for something.
Right. And that's the value of fiction. Movies, Third Encounter, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind was a tremendous movie, a great public service because it dramatized this process you've just described and the emotions that it can raise and the issues. So in a way, that's the job of fiction. That's part of what motivated my books as well, to introduce. It's a young adult type novels, and young adults can be more idealistic and then manifest the good ideas into reality. Older people tend to be stuck in the job and the commitments that they've made to the fossil fuel industry. They may not be able to make any changes. There you go.
Right. And something that we see in the UFO community is post. So okay, World War II happens. With the creation of the atomic weapon, largely being the deterrent which ended the war, after that, we have a spike in UFO sightings. It's, Roswell happens, it gets covered up. The uptick in UFO sightings in modern day ufology starts to really pick up with the creation of the nuclear weapon. Now, after World War II and the Manhattan Project, after World War II, people were so patriotic. They had so much trust in the government, in the military, because it felt good to be an American, right? We were on the right side of history. So in the older generations, we see this willingness to kind of comply. And then we get deathbed confessions and, that kind of stuff. But bring it full, to 2025, the people that are having experiences are more likely to speak out because they've grown up where a world that, George Lucas created Star Wars and, really opened the galaxy up, right? And just started conditionalizing society to life being pretty abundant in the cosmos. So
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful picture.
Right. So we go from this really patriotic country to this very, very distrusting society. And I mean, it's weird, but do you think we're closer to a complete total disclosure?
Well, let me share. I was telling my wife just yesterday, it finally dawned on me. What's the definition of democracy? And it really got a good definition because the United States, of course, became a democracy because it left a monarchy. So in a way, that rebellion is institutionalized with turning over the president every 4 years.
Yes.
I'll give you 5 seconds to absorb that shock. This is institutionalized rebellion. That's the definition of democracy. You can vote in whatever you want, rebel against whoever's there. Here's your chance, dude.
Yes. And that is it's order. It's order among chaos.
Order among chaos. That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah. And but okay. But we also, I think that if the founding fathers could somehow be transported to today, they would look at us and be like, guys, we wrote these laws next to candlelight. These things were meant to be adapted for the time, changeable. This is why we gave you the power, right? Things have changed, right? So you're supposed to change.
Yeah, time passes more fastly as you slow down. As you approach a gravitational field, time goes faster. So there you go.
Yeah. Now, people have been talking about this. Speaking of explosions, just explosive information. People have been talking about this dude, Matt Livelsberger, and I noticed you had something that you wanted to pull up. Now, the Tesla truck bomber.
Oh, yes.
He left. So he sent this email. Now, were you paying attention to the drones over New Jersey and that whole situation?
Yeah, I was. I kept waiting for some government person. I kept waiting for some government person to say, "Oh yeah, well, this is a program we've been working on for 5 months," but nobody said that. So,
right. In fact, the White House said we've determined it's not a threat, but we don't know what it is.
That's unbelievable.
What?
Yeah, what?
That doesn't even make sense. That literally does not compute. You don't know what it is, but you know it's not a threat.
Well, I never heard anybody in the media say what you just said. Why didn't somebody say it in the media? What, this does not compute?
those terms they should not, they don't work together. So, a lot of people have been claiming that this is something else, right? I've had congressmen, come reach out to me, asking my thoughts about it and asking me what my opinion is and what do I think it is, and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, in front of Trump Tower in Las Vegas, a Tesla truck blows up, and an email from that person gets sent to Sean Ryan and to a few other people, claiming that these drones are some sort of anti-gravitic deep black program, that the United States and China are in like a Cold War, and it's almost like a show of force. What is going on? Do you believe this?
Yeah, I looked that up and I printed it out. I'm going through here to find the passages. Gravatic was the magic word.
Yeah, what triggered me on this was that he specifically mentions that he had a top secret clearance, and he was read in on or was working with the UAP task force, and he was working on UAP an USAP, an unacknowledged special access program. Now, when Sean Ryan first said it on his podcast, when they were reading it for the first time, he didn't know what an USAP was. And I'm screaming at the TV. I'm going, dude, it's an unacknowledged special access program. And he's talking about UAPs. This guy is a Green Beret. He's highly decorated. Everyone has spoken highly of him. He blew up a Cybertruck, which is, by the way, bulletproof. The only person actually injured was himself. I don't think he was aiming to kill anyone, but it's hard to take that stance, obviously. Doing what he did, but he wanted to make a statement, is what he claims.
So we have the joining of many forces, among them what this book is talking about, the imminent. As my understanding is, in 2023, laws are passed that Congress should know. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And so this is one of those instances. Everybody should write their congressional representative and say, I want to know what this gravatic stuff is and what's happening with these drones.
Right.
Let's just face it. The FBI is in charge of domestic stuff.
Right.
As you know, the CIA really is offshore. The NSA is the listening post for the offshore. So in theory, they're not supposed to do anything within the boundaries of the United States. So it's
against the law.
Yeah. So the FBI is the lawfully appointed institution for investigate these things, and of course they could get the assistance of the military.
Yes.
And so we, I can read here briefly part of what the Livisberger said. It said, what we have been seeing with drones is the operational use of gravatic propulsion systems powered by most recently China and the East Coast, but throughout history, the U.S. Only we and China have this capability. And China has been launching them from the Atlantic, from submarines for years, but this activity has recently picked up. So this is a show of force, and they're using it similar to how they use the balloons for signal intelligence, which is also part of the integrated comm system. So now, so here we have the conflict. This gentleman appears to have the credentials, this top secret clearance. Apparently he was being trained as a drone operator, which can be worldwide, by the way. The drone can go worldwide, and the operator, be sitting in any office that they choose. So it appears he has some experience with these interacting with devices, which he's claiming have an anti-gravity propulsion system. So, but now let's balance that out with some other things that appear to be in the news, and that is the The poor guy had post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. And, my wife and I, as transcendental meditation teachers, we've interacted with people who have severe PTSD. We lived in Maryland for 8 years, and we ended up, my wife ended up teaching a couple guys that had severe PTSD. One was hired as a security guard, and he told her, he told his employer, I don't dare wear a weapon. Well, yeah, what does that mean, dude? It means I'm going to pull it on somebody. So he started meditation, and he was so grateful. He called up my wife months later and says, I can carry my weapon now, and I don't have to worry. And by the way, there's been a lot of research on the benefits of meditation for PTSD. So the real question is, did Livisberger really have a PTSD break, and then caused him to use this language of, basically paranoia? He could be projecting his inner feelings onto these drones, for which the government really hasn't addressed. So we as the bystanders are sort of caught between the messages of somebody who may have the security clearance and knowledge to say something authoritative, versus the other government institutions which are not saying anything, and thus leaving it up to us. And so any of our conspiracy theories can kick in at this point. We could say, maybe they're being quiet just to let us prepare ourselves for the unknown. And then at some point they'll say, yeah, it really was some aliens sending those drones,
Right.
as opposed to them. So they're letting us project our imagination and letting us sort of digest the variety of truths that could be coming up in the future, just letting us boil in our own juices. How's that for a metaphor?
Right. And it's honestly kind of haunting when you say it that way, because you're right. You're absolutely right. The silence and the lack of truth, or the lack of answers, just allowed conspiracies to run wild, and for people to start thinking, that they're searching for nuclear technology and or a missing nuke that might be. And, that starts really freaking people out. Like I live on the East Coast. I'm in Boston. I'm not far from there.
Yeah.
If a nuke goes off there, I'm in trouble, So when those things start getting floated around, you start asking, what the hell? Like, did they just test the waters a little bit and let us start showing?
As you say this, Ty, that leads me to an additional theory. Put this in the pot, and that is maybe the Biden administration said, this is going to be really hot. We're just gonna keep clam up here until the Trumps takes over, and then they can decide how they're going to handle it for the next 4 years.
Well, Trump said he says this about almost everything, which is kind of funny. But he says I'm going to handle it. I can't do a good Donald Trump impersonation like a lot of people can. I'm going to handle it. I'm going to tell you on the first day. I kind of morph into like I don't know, a bad Italian accent or something. But he says he's going to do everything on the first day, day one.
Right.
He has said that in the first few days of his, once he gets in office, that he's going to tell people what these drones were, and that he said our government does know what they are. And
well, that's good. I haven't heard that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. He said that, and he's like, they're flying over Bedminster. I can't even golf. So when the sitting president won't go golfing at his own course, I think we should probably ask why. Right?
Yeah,
he said he won't go there.
Yeah, that's going to be quite interesting. I hadn't heard that he addressed the issue, but now that I've heard that, it sort of makes sense that the Biden administration just, why suck up all the news space with this drone stuff when they've got the changeover to deal with?
But okay, I'm going to argue with you here. Not argue, but I'm going to play devil's advocate, if you will. If you are Biden and you're sitting in your last four fucking when I have a guest like you on, a congressman or someone of high estate, I try not to swear, but sometimes my sailor mouth comes out. When he's in his last couple days, and he's not going to be remembered as a he may be remembered. I don't know, but as of right now, very low impact president. Trump will be remembered not only just because he's Trump, but also the pandemic. Right? And then winning again. But people will, in the future, will forget about the president that came in between them. Even though Biden has been a politician his whole life, he just doesn't really make waves. But what if in his last couple days, he stands up at the podium and says, my fellow Americans were not alone, and then just walks off? He becomes instantly in the records. Instantly. What does he have to lose?
I like that. Let's put that thought out there. Let's vibrate it out.
Half the country will think he's making it up anyway, right? Because he's old. So they'll say he's, he's got dementia. You can't trust a word he says, right? But then Alex Jones of the world will say he's telling the truth. So, could be fun. Could be interesting. Mr. Biden, if you want to be remembered, I know a way.
That'd be a great memory. I love it. I love it. See, you're a writer at heart. There you are.
Yeah, I've always been. I have always been. But I want to ask you. I want to ask you that. So, do you think the abduction phenomena? Now, when I talk to Congress, when I talk to members of Congress, we actually, in the group that I'm working with, and I'm working with some very high level individuals, we have all agreed that the abduction phenomena cannot be something that we lead with. And this is a strategic, it's something strategic. It is not that the experiencer is not valued their experience. Like it's not that we're not trying to validate that, but the first domino that has to fall is UFOs exist, aliens or extraterrestrial life, non-human intelligence exists. That has to be the first domino, and then the rest will fall, right? We can't lead with, hey, we're being abducted by aliens and expect to get results. That can be intuitive.
In my novel name with the Genesis name in it, we have an alien abduction scene in there where the mother of the twins is abducted. And so it puts a positive spin. So that was the intent, put a positive spin on it and show that there are options, that what could appear to be an entirely negative experience could have positive value. And so we have good aliens, and of course we had then the bad aliens. And I think that's an important thing to have in people's minds. And as parents and grandparents think about getting gifts for their children. So yes, thank you. Yeah. So here we're seeing that the cover of the Genesis, the origin story, and notice the twins are being born on a submarine, and the submarine is lowering a UFO obtained during the Roswell incident, which of course is a big debate, as you read about in the book Imminent and elsewhere. Were there actually such UFOs saved and exploited for their technology? And many people would say yes. So that UFO underneath the sub is being lowered to the North Pole as a message by the Eisenhower administration to tell aliens that don't fuck with us. We know what's going on, because all spaceships have transponders, as you know. And if the transponder happens to be at the North Pole, it's no longer going in a circular orbit. It's it's just pointing in one direction, which is up. And so here we're saying the transponder energy is going up into the submarine, affecting the fetus in the mother's womb. And also the pole star above is radiating downward. And those two forms of radiation are affecting the DNA of the children as they're about to be born, owing to the shock of that radiation. And when they come out, the children are shown to have superpowers. So this is the origin story, and it's the hook on which a great TV series could be made, just like the series Stargate, which has this great opening scene of the Stargate going whoosh, allowing people to travel in the wormhole between planets across the universe.
I would love to work on that show. I would love to work on that show.
I would love to work with you.
Do you think that there could be some now say there is the good and the we're going off the notion right now that there are good non-human intelligence and bad non-human intelligence, and maybe that's where our ancestors and others got the idea for angels and demons and
exactly.
all that kind of stuff, right? It starts making sense, right? Because again, we talk about the entanglement, right? The good and the bad, the light, the dark, the macro, the micro. They're one, the other. Reaction. For every action, a reaction, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Balance. So
balance.
Do you think that there are what you would call a quote unquote angels and good extraterrestrials that have our best interest at heart, and that there is another malevolent force that does not, and maybe we're being influenced by both a lot? Do you think that is probably a possibility, or a probable possibility?
Yeah, that's a good word, probability. We live in a probabilistic world, and I think it's sort of a quantum leap for a lot of people to move away from black and white. It's either this or that, to say it's both and. It's an act of imagination. I think the greatest psychologists will say that people who can tolerate opposites in their mind can actually deal with things better, because they can hold those opposites apart and thus see the delicate gradations between them and make judgments without being pulled into a vortex.
Right. So knowing enough to know that, I agree. So when we got these guys out there like Chris Bledsoe, right, that have these interactions regularly with what he puts a very religious framework on his encounters, and that's okay. I try not to get too far plagued with religious vernacular. So he sees orbs, but he's able to almost telepathically call them in. Well, I shouldn't say almost. I mean, they've put monitors on him, and they find that he goes into this. I don't know what wave it is. Is it the theta or the delta? It's like the same one that a master meditator can go into. So he goes into this mode and he almost calls in these orbs, and they're getting it on video, they're getting it on other sensors, and then they have him hooked up, so they're reading his brainwaves, and all the data says that he's able to call these things in.
Wow.
And then he talks about a meeting with the lady in white, this non-human intelligence, this divine feminine, if you will. I mean, do you think there's validity to that, to a story like that, and that we could be? I mean, we could really, really, really use our minds on a whole complete different level.
Well, so your question is, could we legitimately use a story like that as in fiction?
Well, no, I'm saying,
As a
I'm
story
asking,
in the-
I'm asking, do you think that there are people out there? We talked about remote viewing. There are people out there who are, do you think they're actually making contact? Bypassing the government, bypassing whatever,
Sure.
and having instances of their own.
Well, I think this is an instance where we can hold two things in our mind at once. That is, there's a possibility that that's true, and then the other thing we hold in our mind is, well, there's a possibility it's not true. We've all seen enough instances of magic shows, or even unintended so-called phenomena, but which are not originated, in the way that they say is originated. So I think the scientific perspective is to say, well, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at it. Let's not be afraid to look at it. That's the main thing.
Right.
And so in that context, if the individuals involved in that seem to be authentic and sincere, which, if I may make a little side comment, I think some in our political realm today are not authentic and they're not sincere. But that said, if these people you're talking about are authentic and sincere, then we'll allow them the chance to make their case.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And that makes sense. So, okay, you're reading Imminent right now. So that's something to touch on. Because I want to talk to you about UFO crash retrieval specifically. Do you think that the U.S. government is in possession of intact craft?
I read enough. I think they are. So that's one of my closely held conspiracy theories. Of course, that means I believe in UFOs as well. So there's a whole chain of inference. But I think enough people have indicated that there's a strong possibility. I'll give it a 95% belief.
Well, apparently, so this is just word on the street that this Saturday, News Nation and Ross Coulthart, they're going to be showing video of an egg-shaped craft crash retrieval effort. Now, I do not know what it entails, but they have some sort of video of a crash retrieval. Because, one of the things you always hear about these stories about crash retrievals is you'll look, whoever the person is telling us the story, if they were there, they look over and there's a soldier that's filming.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, I mean, a lot of people or someone filming, documenting what's happening. So apparently that's about to come out. I mean, so what do you think about, do you think Roswell actually happened? And do you believe that that's where the cover up began and where technology starts to boom? Because if you look at the correlation, it's either a complete happy accident or it's dead on. But you look at the trajectory and it just booms.
So let me use the metaphor. I brought this up to some friends, which I'm posing this as a paradox of our modern life. So we have Santa Claus. Parents say, yep, kids, the Santa Claus is going to come tomorrow night. Go to sleep now. You're going to be so happy when he comes. And then on other parts of the year, we have Easter Bunny. Easter Bunny is going to come, guys. Close your eyes, go to sleep, and the Easter Bunny will come and leave you some chocolate stuff here. But wait the friggin' minute here. 2 years later, the kids learn their parents have been out and out lying to them. What? My parents are frigging liars? They told me about Santa Claus and it doesn't really exist. Oh, they told me about the Easter Bunny. It doesn't really exist. What the heck? I'm going to divorce my parents be emancipated, minor, and I'm going to leave the country. In fact, I'm going to find a country that doesn't believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. So now this is a philosophical conundrum. The question is, where in the world did Santa Claus myth and the Easter Bunny myth come from, and why does our culture support it? That's the major question. Well, I'll give you in my mind, the easy answer is we're training our kids to learn how to deal with bumps in the road. Well, what does that mean? Bumps in the road. We're training our kids. You can get sucked into a belief, kid, and then somebody tells you, that was a lie, but it was fun, wasn't it? And be a man, be a woman, take it, and continue on with your life. Maybe that is the real lesson, and that's why parents support it, because this is our first occasion to learn that people dish us lies, and then they take it back. And we got to learn to man up. We got to learn to woman up and take it with a smile. So maybe that's what we're facing with the UFO stories, like you're posing. The fact of the matter is, we just have to avoid, I'm going to use a technical term here, we have to avoid freaking out. What do you think?
I would agree. I mean, we all know that one of the main concerns that most people who have ever been in a position of power or
Yes,
had any say or stake in national security will say that, we don't want the goal, the reason for the secrecy is we don't want to cause mass hysteria, right? We don't listen. I think we're past that. I think we're past that point.
That's the hope. That's the hope. Yeah, very good point.
Listen, I get it. After World War II, right? Really, really, really. After World War II, after Hitler, after everything that happens, and then, we get out of it and immediately we go into the Cold War, right? Almost, fairly close. We go into a Cold War, and it's a very frightening time. I understand why we maybe didn't want to add more to the mix, right? This complete unknown. However, what if this is the one thing that can unite us? We see that in government right now. We see these UFO hearings, and it is the one subject that you'll see Amanda AOC and Nancy Mace, one's Democrat, super liberal, one's super conservative Republican. They're at each other's throats all day, every day. But when it comes to UAPs, they can sit in the same.
I love it. I love it. That's a vision. That's a vision.
What if a mistake was made, and instead of covering Roswell up for the safety of humanity, if that's how they justify it, and that's how they sleep at night, well, I understand it. But what if we were completely wrong, and this the only thing that could actually unite humanity? Because it doesn't matter whether what I've always liked about the topic of UFOs and the phenomena in general is when you start talking about a non-human intelligence, that means you're bringing you've now transcended black, white, male, female, Asian.
Beautiful.
You've transcended all of that, right? You're not talking about any creed, race, religion, sect, anything.
Beautiful.
You're talking about non-human intelligence and human intelligence, right? So we're all equal in this conversation. And that's what I've always loved about it. So what if this is the only thing that can unite humanity?
Right.
And we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot.
So coming back to Carl Jung, he identified, not only do we have the unconscious, but we have the shadow side, all the stuff we're afraid of. and his writings have entered our popular culture. People sing about, make rock and roll music about the shadow side and the dark side.
Yep.
And in a way, the whole UFO thing is a dark side because it's, our institutions have put the lid on it, right? That's what all these books are about. But, this book, Imminent, is saying, well, the lid is now bouncing around, folks. It's bubbling. The pressure is getting too great. So the real question is, as Carl Jung talks about, is our ability to handle it. That's the real issue, which you've just said very beautifully.
Yeah.
Our ability to handle it. And so, when you learned that the Santa Claus was not really a real figure, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I was actually fine. I was a kid who figured it out quick, right?
I know we all figured it out.
But I figured it out quick. Like I was like, this sounds like bullshit.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what? You telling me he gets to every single person in the world in one night? I don't know. I was like 3 years old, like, that doesn't make sense. But no, I'm just kidding.
Well, so that's an interesting way. I mean, that's one manner of educating your kids, is let them find out rather than saying, "Oh, hey, Tyler, come on over. We're going to have the talk now. You've just turned, 8.5 or whatever, and I'm sorry to say, but there's not really a Santa Claus. How do you feel about that?" So that's sort of the other way. And are we prepared for somebody to have that kind of conversation with regard to UFOs, or would we rather figure it out ourselves? That's an interesting dichotomy.
Ooh, that is interesting. Would it be? Oh my God, I'm gonna put a pin in that one. That's a really interesting, fascinating kind of way of looking at it. But I will say this. And I think that's what most people want, is some sort of authoritative outlet to tell them it's real, right? So they can, it's not enough for them to look outside and see it's raining. They need to go watch the news and get the forecast, right? It's just like, come on, you know what I mean? So there will always be people that want to kind of keep their head buried in the sand, but I think most people out there today will, barring, craft just showing up over major cities and we don't know why, barring that kind of disclosure, like a forced disclosure, I think we'd be fine. I really do. I think it would be very similar to the Santa thing, like we just discussed. It's a very good angle of an approach to looking at it.
Yeah, because you have a large group, and people figure it out at different rates. So you have the early innovators, or the early, people who understand the middle and then the late followers. There's sort of a natural flow to it, and everybody can take it at their own pace. So, on an unconscious level, we have all these great movies. What is it? Independence Day. The super gigantic spaceship hovers over Washington, D.C.
Great.
Now, the fact is, we get enough movies like that. How does that differ from it happening in real life?
Right.
We're all rehearsing. We're all rehearsing the whole thing, and that's what I like about my books. If I may come back to that helps us rehearse different ways of dealing with good aliens versus bad aliens. We're introducing the idea of good aliens, helping us deal with the bad aliens who happen to have looked like human leaders, taking over certain important roles and denying global warming.
Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. I really want to let you kind of give your have you ever seen anything? Have you ever had an experience of your own that you would like to share?
Well, yeah. So this is a psychological experience. I remember after I finished officer training, I was on my way from the West Coast where my parents lived, going to the East Coast in Florida where I had my first duty station. But I stayed over at a buddy's house in Minneapolis, a college friend where I went to college there. And I can't remember, I think I was taking a nap, something, and I had this really cosmic experience. I felt like I was a shooting star going out of the solar system into the galaxies and exploring, the far reaches of the universe. It's a very real experience, a dream, which I strongly remember even now. So this is, decades ago. And so my interpretation of that was, well, that's a Kundalini experience. Of energy coming up my spine, and my body was, or my mind was interpreting that in terms of this hurtling through the galaxies. But then, I'm reading the literature, there's yogi stuff and Edgar Casey's stuff and everything, and the idea, and of course you throw the entanglement while you're at it. We're all connected across the universe. Very real. And the question is, well, maybe that, even though that was a dream, it was so real, maybe there was some reality to it in the sense of expansion of awareness. Maybe that did represent a connection to the cosmos, and an expansion of awareness to things beyond just this boring earthly plane, if I may say that. So anyway, that was an experience worth talking about, and thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see
the
here.
reason I say this, if I may interrupt, the reason I say this is if any of our viewers have those kinds of experience, I can only recommend, don't be frightened. That's what I really want to say. Don't be frightened. Accept it as a gift of insight, that this is your body telling you the farther reaches of the human spirit.
Right. That's a very good. It's a very comforting way to experience. If you are having, things that you can't really explain, just know that you're not alone.
You're not
B,
alone.
You're part of something so much larger. And that is exciting, right? Because we kind of grow up in this world that you're taught, black and white. This exists. All right. I can hold it. I can feel it. I can touch it. I can smell it. I can drink from it. Right. This exists. I can hold it in my hand. I can feel it. Right. I can lick it if I wanted. That'd be gross. But, we're really kind of hardwired and raised for a black and white world. And it is not until much further along that we have these moments of conversion where the veil becomes thinnest. And
the veil becomes thinner. Thank you. That's beautiful.
Yeah. We learn the world is really gray. A lot of gray.
A lot of gray.
So where can people, I'm going to pull it up. Where can people find you and your work? I have it here on Amazon, so I'll include these links in the description below for both of your books and for all the work that you do. How can people stay in touch?
Yeah, I invite people, check out Amazon, Barnes & Noble. These all print on demand. You type in Thrall Conspiracy, and that'll get you both books. The first one is Thrall Conspiracy, Solar Conjunction. That's the hero at age 61, but he looks 23. And he beats his sister again, and they find out that the aliens are trying to kill him because their destiny, as their mother told him as she was dying, their destiny is to save the world. Like anybody. You too, Ty, your destiny is to save the world. And all of our listeners, they're here for a reason. And so, and they do, the picture on that first book is there's a giant up in Antarctica or Arctica. There's a giant who from ages past has been supported by the bad aliens to protect the spores, the fungi that will help Earth heal itself after all the global pollution. And there you go. So the hero is at the bottom, very bottom, fighting the giant. But the giant turns into a friendly creature, um,
Don't give the
and
whole book away.
help save the world by helping the hero. So
Ah,
it has a happy ending, or does it? There's a
ooh,
interesting ending, and I've told my friends I finally figured out the book. The whole book is like a trip. So I'm not encouraging anybody to take LSD, but if you read this book all the way to the end, you'll have a sense of what it could be. So
right.
there you go. And then we
I
have the origin story is the other book, Genesis.
origin story.
The origin, starting with the birth of the twins, where they came from, and how they were assigned the destiny of saving the world from global warming, and what they did. It turns out this is a great read for kids who are in a divided family. If your parents are divorced, it's not because of you; it's because your parents loved you and your siblings, and wanted you to be able to save the world by gaining superpowers in a way that's easy to understand, and you learn all the martial arts that's needed to save the world. So that's
That's
the two
amazing.
twins are brought up separately, so that they could learn to control their superpowers such that when they did come together, it would be coordinated, and thus they could fight the bad aliens.
Wow, that is quite the premise. I am going to absolutely have to take a read, and maybe I'll send them to you so you can autograph them, and then get them back to me. That'd be super fun, and I would definitely love to talk again soon, Dr. John. So how do you? I mean, I say Sorflaten, so I mean, I'm guessing I'm either on or off.
Well, at the beginning of the show, you pronounced it right. Sorflaten. Accent on the
Sorflaten.
first syllable. Yeah, Sorflaten, and that's good. It's good
So
Norwegian name.
yeah. I was gonna ask what kind of what is where is that from? Because it's definitely very.
I figured out I'm related to all the Sorflatens in the U.S. and Canada.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
I know it's amazing, but that's I did the genealogy, and we're all related.
Oh yeah. All right. I gotta do that. I keep telling myself I will, but yeah, no, thank you so much for
Well, thank you.
taking. I mean, I usually only go for about an hour and 20 minutes typically. We're pushing 2 hours, 15 minutes. So this was an amazing conversation. I could talk
Totally
with you.
amazing. I really enjoyed your questions, and yeah, I enjoy you're fulfilling my humanities degree. Thank you.
Well, after, maybe after Contact in the Desert and the MUFON Symposium, I'll invite you back on because that's when I'll be starting season 3. Because I'll be wrapping up season 2 right before then, taking a couple months break, and then coming back in August of 2025. So I'd love to have you back, Doctor. You are an amazing
Fantastic.
guest. And for
Fantastic.
everyone out there, I will include all of the links for his books, for everything that he wants in there, so you can find it. And to everyone out there in the podcast sphere, thank you so much. You are the reason that I can do this show, and why I can, continue to have these deep philosophical conversations with guests like John here. So thank you guys all. You know what it is. Give the like, share, subscribe if you're watching. And if you're listening on one of our amazing podcast platforms, rate the show, leave a review. It helps, and it's all free. If you want to help to support the show further, you can become a member on YouTube. You'll get early access to everything, behind the scenes stuff. And then in the future, we're going to do members only live streams. And then some behind the scenes stuff from all the films that we're going to be doing, and hopefully be a part of going forward. So lots going on, John, lots going on.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, everyone, keep your eye on the sky. You never know what might fly by.